fabulous. It's Fabulous 500, another $5 scratch game from the INT'L, loaded with $500 cash prizes, with a top prize of $25,000.
You have 10 chances to win.
Fabulous $500.
There's cash to catch with just a scratch. Fabulous. Fabulous 500.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, Braxa to pay out $3 million to road workers over the next 2 weeks. Students at the St. Vincent the Grenadines Community College received donation from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. And St. Vincent the Grenadines' main opposition party writes to the UN and Commonwealth. Join us at 7 p.m. for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game, more money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, June 18th is $347,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game, more money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
On Friday, June 18th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $315,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $315,000.
Welcome to this week's edition of Roundtable Talk. We have a very special program for you. We have a very special guest in studio this evening. He is none other than Dr. Richard BYRON-COX, a scholar, lawyer, published author, international civil servant, lecturer, and there is more. Welcome to the program. Welcome home. Tell us, who is Richard BYRON-COX?
Okay. Good afternoon, evening, good day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor and a great pleasure to be here. I love this program, and I'm really pleased to be invited. It's always great to be home. I love St. Vincent, you know, and so it's always a joy to be here. Basically, Richard BYRON-COX is a Vincentian who always sort of believed in the nobility of this country and its people. As the anthem says, whatever the future brings, our fate will see us through. I suppose I personify that in my own personal life, so to speak. I do not necessarily believe that I have achieved anything special, but what I do believe is that the greatest honor in my life is to be citizen of this country. That is the highest office in this land, and I happen to occupy that office. And because I occupy that office, I take it very seriously. So what I do, as you know, as you said, I'm an international civil servant. I've been doing that for almost 25 years of my life. And when you occupy the highest office in the land, you must take that not only as a privilege, but as a responsibility. So most of my professional life, St. Vincent has always been at the back of my mind. You know, as you know, I went to university. I have a PhD in international law. And from early in my life, somehow or the other, there was always this thing that drove me that, you know, I somehow or the other felt that I had to do something with my life. Exactly what I didn't know. And you might not believe this, but by the time I was 9 years old, I'd come to the conclusion that I'm going to have a PhD. I didn't know I was going to get that. But that was in my mind. That somehow drove me. But I was
What did
heavily...
you know about a PhD at 9?
Well, that's the whole thing. There's a man named Conrad Sayers, and I don't believe anybody has influenced me more than he has in terms of people who I know directly, you know.
And for those who don't know, Conrad Sayers is a former politician.
Yes, he's a former parliamentarian representative of Central Kingstown, you know. And Conrad influenced me greatly. He taught me how to play chess, for example. That's the only board game I can play. I don't know how to play dominoes, I can't play draft, I can't play cards, I can't play anything. The only game I know how to play is chess. And Conrad Sayers taught me that. But somehow or the other too as well, I sort of knew deep down inside that that was the world I was supposed to live in, you know, the world of the mind, the world of the intellect, the world of the spirit. I just knew that. Somehow or the other I knew that from since I was very young. But what I'm driving at is this, that I knew that I had to do something with my life. Now, I'm not physically built to be any great sportsman, and I don't really want to be great in any way. What I wanted to be is the best that I can be. And so that is what drove me all my life. And I remember entering university, and this is no joke, what I'm going to tell you. And the day I entered university, and we were sitting with some friends, and I just said to everybody there and then, I will get first class honors. It's not a joke, you know. And this had nothing to do with brains or talent or gift. We were only two, and we were the first two to have ever gone there to study. And I remember the teacher saying, St. Vincent the Grenadines, where is that? You know, and I had to explain to them. And the teacher said this to me. She said, the teacher of language, she said, you're the face of your country. And that struck me. I was the face of St. Vincent the Grenadines. And I made up my mind, this wasn't about me. This was about this country. And I left university, of course, with the first class honors. I left university, the best student for 3 years and all of that. That has nothing to do with brains. It has to do with what I believe as regards what is my role as a person. You know, so my life has been governed by this very basic principle. That if I did the best, made the best of myself, this would, in one way or the other, help my family, and it will help my community, and it will help my country, and it might probably help the world. I have arrived at that stage. As you know, I work for the United Nations, and I have been blessed, privileged to have been able to do things that affect the world.
Let's talk a little bit about your early beginnings, the way you grew up, etc., and what you think has contributed to your getting this far in life.
Well, I am a true Caribbean man in the sense that I understand our culture and our people. And I want to tell you this. When I was about 16 years old, probably a little bit older, I'm not sure. I can't remember the exact age. But I read something called Inward Hunger, written by former Prime Minister, the late, great Eric Williams. You know? And he discusses how he went to Oxford, you know. And there's a story, and I don't like telling the story because I get, you know, goose pimples when I remember it. But Eric explains that when he went to Oxford and they had to do these exams and so on, you know, when they just entered, as you know, he went to study languages and fine arts. And the paper came back for history, and he got, you know, distinction and so on, and French and whatever. But then it came back for Latin. And when the paper came back for Latin, the teacher gave everybody their paper. And he said, who here is Eric Williams? Eric said, I. He said, come here. Who did this paper? He said, I. He said, well, you're going to do it over in front of me. And Eric sat down and did it over. The Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago did it over. You understand? And he realized he had made a mistake. So he corrected it. And he said, is this why you wanted me to do it over? I'm sorry, I was probably writing too fast. The professor told him, this is at Oxford, the professor told him, you should not be in this class. You should be teaching this class. You know Latin better than I. That's a fact. You know, and those things sort of drove me somehow or the other. Somehow or the other, those things was in me. Now, I don't know if most people know this, But Eric Williams was one of the first persons to turn Oxford on its head. And they had to give him his PhD. Listen very carefully. We were taught before Eric came on the scene with capitalism and slavery that it's Wilberforce and all of these people who got us free. Eric demonstrated that capitalism is what made us free. Capitalism needed for us to be free. Wilberforce, yes, did one or two things and talk, here and there, whatever, in Parliament and so on. But this was a dictate from capitalism. That is why the book is called Capitalism and Slavery. Before Eric, the British and Oxford and everybody believed they freed us. Eric proved no. That's a lie. It is wrong. And they had to give him his PhD. My point is that from a very early age, I understood very clearly that, look, I don't want to talk any politics, but it is something that our present Prime Minister says, and that has always driven me. I am no better than anybody, but nobody is better than me. I will achieve this thing. I think that, but about 1979, the great Stalin is truly great, wrote a song called Caribbean Man. And I think you know
the Caribbean Man.
Yes, that song. And that is when he first won the first monarch, first title. And later on, I would follow Stalin's career. He has this song. He says, black man got to keep on jamming. For black man to get a little something. Because I don't tell you already, black man don't get nothing easy. And those things are things I think that fashioned me as a human being. I was always determined to succeed. And it was not always easy. I just want to share a story I never shared before because I don't have the strength to talk of some of these things sometimes. But when I was at university doing my PhD, I was so poor that, I was starving to death. When I came back to this country, everybody thought I had AIDS. I was so slim. And I remember one day I went home from school, and I had not eaten anything for like 2.5 weeks. And as I entered my room, I fell on the floor and hit my head and knocked myself out. And I woke up. It was all dark around me. And I used to have a Sanyo tape recorder. And I stretched my hand out and just pressed play. And Bob Marley has a song called Jah Would Be Waiting There. And somehow, for some strange reason, the tape was at that point, the second verse of the song. It goes like this. Many a times I sit and wonder why this race is so very hard to run. And I say to my soul, take a rest. The battle would be won. Just like a ship tossed and driven, battled by the angry sea. Any day now they're going to let you down. But remember, he would be there and he would see you through. Those are, I think, the things that form me.
We'll be back in just a moment. When we come back, we're going to talk about your international career and some other issues. Back in just a moment.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, BYRON-COX to pay out $3 million to road workers over the next 2 weeks. Students at the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Community College received donation from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. And St. Vincent and the Grenadines' main opposition party writes to the UN and Commonwealth. Join us at 7 p.m. for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, June 18th is $347,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
Hey! More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
This one is fabulous.
Yes, fabulous. It's Fabulous 500, another $5 scratch game from the INT'L, loaded with $500 cash prizes. With a top prize of $25,000.
You have 10 chances to win.
Fabulous $500.
There's cash to catch with just a scratch. Fabulous. Fabulous 500.
On Friday, June 18th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $315,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $315,000.
Welcome back. That was an emotional break. You did your first degree in Russia.
Yeah.
And what did you major in? At the
Well,
time?
I majored in law first and foremost. I'm first and foremost a lawyer. But after that, I did international relations, foreign policy, diplomacy, and of course languages. So I'm trained in all of those areas. I've probably prepared to do what I'm doing.
Okay, so you started your career at the UN as a lawyer,
Yes.
but now you are the head of capacity building and innovation. What
Yes.
do you do in that role?
Well, basically, all of the training programs, all of the education programs of the organization, be this at the national level, regional level, sub-regional level, and international level, it's all falls under me. I design most of these things, and what I don't design, I coordinate, and what I don't coordinate, I assist in. So the entire education and training processes are all more or less managed by myself. I head an office of several people, and we work on different things. That's the first part of my job. The second part of my job is innovations. And innovations mean exactly what it is. I am responsible for the creative ideas, for new ideas, how we reach the world and things like that. So I design a whole set of new innovative things, bring people on board. We have a fundamental training program for people across the board. And just 2 days ago, I launched a special program for SIDS, the small and developing states, where we'll be offering young people, in particular from the Caribbean, opportunities to come to the Secretariat to spend 6 months. We would pay for your food, your ticket, everything, but you have to come back home to work for your country. That's what you. So my job is basically one where I am constantly focused on two things. How do we create the educational training, skills, and so on to implement the Sustainable Development Convention? And secondly, what are the new pathways we have to design in order to get this done? So this is basically, those are the two fundamental pillars on which my work stands.
Okay, how much of your work affects or benefits St. Vincent and the Grenadines?
Well, one of the things that I'm very careful about is that I don't want to be accused of national nepotism, if there's such a thing, So we do a lot of what I do in terms of being focused on particular countries, I do mostly for others and not for my own home country. However, we recently had a very special panel discussion on sustainable development, land, and post-COVID-19 development of the Caribbean. And out of that program, we have decided, the Caribbean young people, because we did it with CYEN, which is the Caribbean Youth Environment Network. And we have decided that we would give 1,000 trees to St. Vincent to help rebuild the watersheds and things like that. since the volcanic eruption. So in the next couple of months, I have already written to Mr. Fitzgerald Providence, who is the Chief Forestry Officer of this country. And,
I had him on the program last week
right.
as well.
Okay, great,
Yes.
right. And we're supposed to buy these trees for St. Vincent to help reforest the country and help in terms of watersheds and so on. Right. That's happening now. That's very concrete. But as I say, I'm very careful about national nepotism.
Okay. You're also a visiting professor at various universities throughout the world?
Yes. Well, I've taught universities on every continent. I've taught from Oxford to Yangtze in Korea and so on. I teach basically sustainable development. I'm recognized as an expert, one of the UN's experts on sustainable development. As a matter of fact, Target 15.3, which deals with something, as you know, there are 17 sustainable development goals, and these goals have targets, right? Goal 15 deals with life on land, and Target 15.3 is a direct result of my work. I designed a project of what is called land degradation neutrality a few years ago, where what I was looking at is how do we continue development without further poisoning or destroying our lands, okay? Because as you would know, by the forecast of the FAO, for example, by 2050, there will be about 9.2 billion people on this planet. It's a lot of people. My own estimation shows me that this is not right. It is going to be more if ceteris paribus, if everything else holds, meaning, why do I say that? Because when the FAO made that forecast, China had not yet gotten rid of its one-child policy. China has since done so, okay? So what we're looking at is that when I was born, when I first heard of the world population, there were 3 billion people. So in my lifetime, you understand, we're now 9 plus. This planet has boundaries. They are what I call planetary boundaries. You understand what I'm saying? And in our own country, for example, more and more of our land is being used for housing. Now that threatens many things, you know. For example, food security, just to mention one, okay? So I designed this project where we were looking at how do you continue development, you know, without destroying more bioproductive land, meaning soil that produces food, okay? And it was done in 14 countries. And out of that came the targets which the UN now use to measure land degradation in the world. And this was managed by me, designed by me, structured by me. That's part of the innovation that I do. Okay, so one of the things that I teach is sustainable development. I also teach public international law. I teach environmental politics across the globe. So I teach these subjects. I'm a visiting lecturer, standing visiting lecturer at 4 universities, but I lecture all over the world.
Okay, how do you manage your time with your substantive position at the UN? And
yeah, it's a very difficult thing, I must say. As a matter of fact, I'm home now in St. Vincent, and I start work every day at 12 midnight because I'm still working on bond time, and I start my work in my office at 6 o'clock in the morning.
You're actually on a working vacation?
Yes, I'm working right now. And my executive assistant looked at me 2 days ago and said, "You can't do this anymore, you'll collapse. You look so tired." And in the time I've been here, I doubt that I've slept more than 25 hours in the entire time that I've been here. And I've been 14 days in quarantine, so you have to understand that. I think, as I said, Stalin always comes back to me. Black man got to keep on jamming for black man to get a little something. Because I don't tell you already, black man don't get nothing easy. So that has always been my life. I've never run away from challenge. I've never, it's, for me, this is what I was made for, you know, and I don't look for any easy way out of this thing. I don't do that. It's a difficult thing to do. It's a tremendously difficult thing to do because I have an office to manage. I have all of these programs to design. But there's nothing I love more than teaching. I just love to be at the university. That's why I did a PhD. I didn't want to be called doctor, really. You know. What I wanted to do was to teach. And I knew it would be easier to get into a university to teach if I had a PhD. And that's why I did that, you know. Because I always, when you have the chance to help someone bring the best out of themselves, because that is what a teacher is supposed to do. If you look at the word teach, it means to show, to guide, to help, to encourage, and so on. You understand? That is what a teacher is supposed to do. Not jump around arguing with the government about different things. That's not what teaching is about. You understand? And when you have the chance to show, to help, to guide, to encourage, to improve, for me, that is what my life is about. And I don't say that there's anything special about me, but there's something special about that. You know, there's something special about that.
Which particular project or program would you say has been the most impactful in your estimation in your position as head of capacity building and innovation?
To be honest with you, I think my internship program, but I have two things which I think are very, very impactful, but ultimately I would say my internship program. The reason why is that I have an internship program which I train young people from around the world every year, probably about, let's say 30 people, and they come to the UN, you know. They come from all around the world, and they come to the UN, and they come with their master's degree, so they're young, and, you know, and I'm supposed to be impressed with their masters, you know. I'm like, you know, I have a master's in this and that and so on. I listened to that. I said, well, you know, you're here, and you know, you would figure some things out in time. And at a point in time, I said to them, listen, never be too arrogant to learn. That's a mistake. I learn from you every day, and you're here to learn. That's the first thing. But you can have 1,000 masters, and you have not self-mastery. Those 1,000 masters mean nothing. You're here to learn to master yourself. And you have got to have a blueprint for your life. You know, in the past when they built houses, you had a blueprint, you know. It's kind of, right? And it was called a blueprint because the ink was always blue. You never use red or whatever. That's why it's called a blueprint, you know. You have to have a blueprint for your life, you know. My internship program has 4 basic facets to it. The first, when you just arrive, the first week is spent doing 3 e-learning courses. One about the United Nations, one about my secretariat, and one about one of the things that I would choose. The reason why is that if you're working with the UN for 3 months, and when you leave, you can't tell somebody what the United Nations is, then what were you doing there? If you're working at my secretariat, and after 3 months, you can't tell somebody what you were doing, then what were you doing there? You don't know anything about the secretariat. That's the first part. The second part is that you're trained to do what I want you to do, to operate the systems I want you to run, and so on and so forth. That's the second part of it. The third part of it is that I give you your personal project, where you have to manage it from start to finish. So, for example, just a few weeks ago, I designed a project for one of my interns, and he had to manage a project of a global essay competition where essays were sent in from around the world. He was only 22 years old, and in 4 languages: Russian, Spanish, French, and English. The UN has 6 official languages, but the other 2 I can't speak. So, right? And I don't allow anything which I don't understand. I'm a lawyer by training. Okay. And he did such a marvelous job. We got essays from 70 countries around the world, from all ages. You know, the youngest person who wrote an essay was 7 years old. The eldest person was 70 years old. But that teaches you several things.
We'll talk about those things when we come back after this second break. Back in a moment.
money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, June 18th is $347,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game. Hello and hi.
Hello everyone, I am Shakel Bob. I am a former Miss Pitani, a former Miss Rural SCG and Miss SCG contestant and runner-up. I'm a lawyer by profession but a pageant lover at heart. Do not let the negatives prey on your mind because a stitch in time saves 9. So, it's COVID vaccination time. Get vaccinated today to reduce the impact of COVID-19 in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
And I urge you, get vaccinated. It is safe and it is effective. Stop the spread, help the fight, and make the choice that is right. And let us unite and do the thing right.
This one is fabulous.
Yes, fabulous. It's Fabulous 500, another $5 scratch game from the INT'L, loaded with $500 cash prizes.
With a top prize of $25,000.
You have 10 chances to win.
Fabulous $500.
There's cash to catch with just a scratch. Fabulous. Fabulous 500.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, BYRON-COX to pay out $3 million to road workers over the next 2 weeks. Students at the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Community College received donation from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. And St. Vincent and the Grenadines' main opposition party writes to the UN and Commonwealth. Join us at 7 p.m. for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
When we took our break, we were talking about the internship program that Dr. BYRON-COX manages. Just to let you know, remind you that you can interact with us. You can ask your questions, your comments of Dr. BYRON-COX at any time on our Facebook or YouTube channels. So we were talking about the young ones and the things that they are expected to learn while on that program.
Yes, so as I was saying, I give you a special project and you have to manage it from start to finish. I think it teaches so many things, you know, but more than anything else, it teaches you self-belief. Because, you know, one of the projects we just did was for the Caribbean where we had this panel discussion. And the intern who did it, her name was Julia from Spain. And when I said, okay, you're going to work with the Caribbean and you're going to do this panel discussion, this young lady went like this. You know, and I said, don't worry, it will be done. And then it was all done, and she was like, wow, you know. And it's like, Prof, because that's what they call me, Prof, I didn't believe. I said, well, remember this as long as you live. If I have so much faith in you, you owe it to yourself to have some faith in yourself. That's the lesson. If you have this faith in me, I owe it to myself to have some faith in myself. So this is what I think is most impactful there. You know, to have people, to see these young people change and to see them grow. I had an intern years ago. His name is Amid from Guatemala. He now runs his own school on sustainable development in this country. And one of the greatest things anybody said to me, he said, you know, every time I have a problem, I sit down and I say, what would Prof. Richard have done? I sit down and I think, how would he have handled this? My point is, it's not me, it's that process which is important. So I think that's the most impactful thing that I have done in my career. I would not change this, you know. And to watch, I mean, the people who've been through my program who at the World Bank or at the IMF or at different institutions around the world, even at the Secretariat where I work, and even the building where I work. There are people who all started their career thanks to my internship program. So I think that's the most impactful thing that I've ever done. To change, you know, Karl Marx once said this, that the issue is not interpreting the world. Philosophers has done that for hundreds of years. The point is to change it. Gandhi went further. You have to be the change you want to see in the world. And you only change the world by changing people. So I think that's the most impactful thing that I've ever done in my career.
How are they selected to this program?
Well, the United Nations has some basic standards. And you must have a bachelor's degree, right? And you must have finished that bachelor's degree not less than a year earlier. Or you can be in a master's program. So that's the first thing. You have to have that basic academic qualification. If you don't have that, no sense apply because they're not going to give it to you. So that's the first thing. But you don't have to have any training or experience in terms of work. Now, all of my interns are selected by me personally. I don't ask any administration to do this. I personally select everybody. And as I said before, don't try to impress me with your masters, because everybody have that. That's the basic qualification. What I look for is something called your attitude. And you have to be willing to learn. That is the basic. You have to be willing to understand that you have to play in a team. This is the United Nations. I tolerate no disrespect to anyone. Incidentally, I'm the head of the team and I'm the only black man there. That means something, huh? I tolerate no disrespect.
What is the United Nations?
Well, the United Nations is, as its name said, it should the United Nations of the world. As you know, it was formed in 1945 after the Second World War. And before the United Nations, there was something called the League of Nations, which was formed in 1919 after the First World War. There are two important things to understand about the League of Nations. One is that the United States was never a member of the League of Nations. And by the Second World War, the United States was the most powerful country in the world. So how are you going to have a United Nations without the most powerful country in the world being part of it? The League of Nations was doomed to fail from the moment it began. That's just objective reality, okay? Now, the United Nations was formed in 1945. Now, the United Nations is a strange beast, right? Why do I say this? In the first place, it was not established to seek justice. It was established to maintain international peace. But elementary logic tells me that where there is no justice, there can be no peace. Peter Tosh once said, I don't want no peace. I man need equal rights and justice. But if you look at the United Nations, its first and foremost function is international peace. You understand? But that is a problematic thing. Secondly, the United Nations has something called a Security Council. Now, most people don't understand what that is. We are there, and it's very important. I hope we'll get to that in a moment. I can just explain a few things.
Talk to us, yes.
You understand? But at that Security Council, there are 15 members, and 5 of them are permanent members, right? These 5 members are the permanent members of the United States, Russia, China, England, and France. Now, that should tell you something already, right? But outside of that, they have what is called a veto. They can stop anything at that Security Council. But that is not what interests me. What interests me is this. This Security Council, these people, are God unto themselves. So let's just assume that Theresa Daniel is a nation, right? And BYRON-COX is another nation. And there's a call between us. That Security Council doesn't have to find out who caused the quarrel and what caused the quarrel and so on. They could sit down, and once they all agree, we are going to bomb Theresa Daniel, they can do it. In other words, they don't have to go to court. It doesn't have to be based on justice. And that is something that you need to understand. One of those members is the only nation in the world to have ever used nuclear weapons against people. one of those nations. Right? All of them have nuclear weapons. Right? We have to understand this. But outside of all of that, I think that's important to understand, because you cannot build a society, right? A functioning society, whether nationally or regionally or globally, without justice. You're going to have problems. But outside of that, the United Nations have done great things. If it wasn't for the United Nations and contemporary international law, St. Vincent could not be an independent country. They would have overrun us and said, no, you have to go back into slavery or whatever. You understand what I'm saying? The United Nations is therefore in many ways a guarantor, in some ways, of a respect for international law and also international morality. And this has got to be understood. So with all its weaknesses, it's a fundamental thing. It has led the fight against AIDS and so on. Right? It has been fundamental in decolonialization, as I just mentioned. Right? And as we speak now, it is in the forefront of fighting some of the most serious challenges that we have, which is climate change, right? Biodiversity loss, of course, land degradation, and so on. So we have to take, as old people used to say in St. Vincent, the good with the bad. Let us put it that way. But there's a need for fundamental reform of the system. But of course, because of that mechanism called the veto, where one of these 5 nations could say, no, right? That's going to be a difficult thing to do, right? But if you remember when this country got its independence in 1979, one of the first ambassadorial appointments we made was to the United Nations, right? And that is because that is the forum where all the nations come together to discuss the pressing issues that affect the world globally, okay? And that is the significance of the United Nations. Outside of that, it needs to be understood, and this must be appreciated by us as a small nation. Please, this is very important to understand. The United Nations is where we have an equal voice. It's one nation, one vote. You big so or you small so. That's very important. What do I mean? Well, have you ever noticed, for example, just to give you one example, the IMF and the World Bank has never had a director, the boss, the general boss of the World Bank, the president of the World Bank, or the CEO of the IMF, from any place else except where? The United States or Europe. Why? Have you ever questioned that? Because those institutions operate from a standpoint of how much money you put in, that's the amount of vote you have. You understand what I'm saying? And that is why it's always a European or an American, because those organizations operate from the standpoint of how much money you pay. Old people used to say, what? He who pays the fiddler calls the tune. Let's understand that. But that is why you've had Kofi Annan as, Secretary General of the United Nations and so on, because it's one nation, one vote. Of course, he could not have become Secretary General if the prominent members didn't agree. He couldn't become that. But still, it's a different system. You understand? And that is why, if I may bring it home to St. Vincent, this is why we got there as well. Now, I don't think that this country has ever appreciated, really, what we have done. And I think that's a mistake. It is the greatest achievement this country has done in foreign policy. Nothing would be greater than that in my lifetime.
We'll talk about that when we come back.
Okay.
Back in just a moment.
On Friday, June 18th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $315,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $315,000.
I'm Erasmus Wiley Glasgow, and I'm feeling perfectly fine. I just had the vaccine and I'm trying to encourage each and everyone to come and get the vaccine. It's important. Life goes on, but with this vaccine, it makes it even easier. Because of the field we are in, we are actually at the front. So each taxi driver should come and take this vaccine because, trust me, it will be important to each and every one of us going forward.
Do not procrastinate, but rather let us vaccinate. More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game, more money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, June 18th is $347,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game, more money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
This one is fabulous.
Yes, fabulous. It's Fabulous 500, another $5 scratch game from the INT'L, loaded with $500 cash prizes.
With a top prize of $25,000.
You have 10 chances to win.
Fabulous $500.
There's cash to catch with just a scratch. Fabulous. Fabulous 500.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, BYRON-COX to pay out $3 million to road workers over the next 2 weeks. Students at the St. Vincent the Grenadines Community College received donation from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. And St. Vincent the Grenadines' main opposition party writes to the UN and Commonwealth. Join us at 7 p.m. for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
Welcome back. When we took that last break, you were on the verge of explaining to us the significance of this country holding a seat on the UN Security Council.
Yeah. Yes, you see, what you have to understand is that it's a revolution of sorts that has taken place. St. Vincent is a very, very small place. And I remember when we won the seat, the Undersecretary General called me up and asked me, how did you all do this? How could you have done this? This tiny nation is now sitting on the most powerful body on the face of this earth as regards international relations, international politics, and the question of peace and security. 1, 2. St. Vincent's only 40 years old. A nation, that's baby, you know, to be sitting there. But more than anything else, if you look at what we have done since we have been there, we have steadily tried to change the narrative, to focus on issues that actually the UN is not designed or was not designed to focus on, that threatens international peace and security. Climate change, land degradation, okay? Things like that, migration. We have, our government, this country, has focused on that. Outside of that, and I think this is the most significant thing, in the past when you taught that you have to have military might, technological might, a whole bunch of money to get there, St. Vincent has proven, this is the key here, that in this day and age, if you are not willing to accept the issues of international morality, justice, the pursuit of peace based not on power, but based on justice and reason, we're going to have problems in this world. St. Vincent could have only gotten there. We don't have the money, we don't have the technology, we don't have military might. What we have is reason, logic, international, a sense that international morality, humanity must govern how this world operates. That is the revolution, That is the revolution. We do not come to the United Nations. We did not go to the Security Council based on might of military power. We went to the Security Council one based on the might of reason. Reason was our power. Decency was our power. The respect for international law and international morality is what won the day for us. I don't say that my country would be able to make a paradigm shift. But what I do say is that my country has proven to the world that the past standards as to how you get there and what should govern this world needs to change if we are going to protect this planet. The problem we have today, Teresa, is not trying to save life on this planet. It's trying to save the life of the planet. I don't know if you understand the difference. We have enough nuclear weapons to destroy this planet 1,000,000 times. But now we are into something called the Anthropocene. What is the Anthropocene? The Anthropocene is where we men, human beings, are now destroying this planet. You understand? Entire ecosystems are collapsing. So even without nuclear weapons, we're destroying this planet. We have to change. That is what St. Vincent is saying to the world now. The survival, not of life on the planet, but life of the planet. Now, to put it in very simple terms, so that we all understand what the discussion is about. Science has proven, natural science, that on the average, you would live 60 days without food, 6 days without water, and 6 minutes without oxygen. Which of those are you going to be able to get without the lands of this planet? Also, you're rich. And you could buy a spacecraft and go to the moon. Well, when you buy the spacecraft and go to the moon, stay up there and don't come back down. Because I can assure you, the moon has no oxygen, the moon has no water, and the moon has no food. So we're not going to be exporting anything to you. Carl Sagan, who was an American astrophysicist, says this: as far as we know, the multiverse, note, not universe, the multiverse, it's a different thing. We haven't found life anywhere else so far. He's not saying that there's none, but we haven't found it. The only planet that can support life is this one. It is fundamental that we save not life on the planet, but the very life of the planet. And this is the significance of St. Vincent's space on the Security Council.
Interesting. We're running out of time. We haven't gotten to your writings as yet, and we really want to talk about, before we go, the challenges from COVID-19 as well as the eruption of the La Soufrière volcano. What are some of the challenges that this country faces going forward?
Yes, I think COVID-19 is a very, very serious challenge for us in a very, very serious way. One of the things that we have to understand is that this country is a very small country. We don't have a lot of money and things like that. Now, take a look at this. Just take a look at this. The Americans can come to this country, you understand, without a visa, whatever. Some of them just come on their driver's license. But for us to go there, we need a visa. You understand? With COVID-19, if this gets worse, they might even demand God knows what. They might tell us not to come at all. This is real, you know. This is not making up a story. Just think about it. My mother used to tell me, Richard, you have to learn to see beyond your nose. And your nose is kind of flat. So you better learn that, right? That's one. Two is this, that we have to understand that if we are not careful, if we don't manage this thing properly, it's not just the medical services would be overrun. The economy of this country will collapse. It's amazing that the government can still run this country with what is happening. It is amazing, you know. It's truly amazing, from my standpoint at least. Look, I heard somebody got up in Parliament and say, oh, you know, they're running we have this budget deficit and so on and so on. The Minister of Finance correctly pointed out, he listed them from India to everybody else, running what? A deficit. Because we're in special times. But this is a tiny country. The challenge of this country as regards COVID is not so much an issue where all of those things I mentioned are key. No, the key is for us individually to understand. Oh, so you don't want to take the vaccine, or you don't want to do this, or you don't want to do that. Your health is not the responsibility of Dr. Roger Duncan first and foremost, you know. And it's certainly not first and foremost the responsibility of Mrs. Simone Keyser Beach. Your health is whose responsibility first and foremost? Yes, that's the first thing. But we have to understand that we live in a community. And if we live in a community, then we must act to maintain that community, because that community belongs to all of us. Now, for example, to give you an example, you have a car, right? And you buy insurance. You probably don't want to buy insurance now. You understand what I'm saying? You want to save the money to do something else. But for your own protection and the protection of the rest of society, you need insurance. There was a Dutch philosopher named Baruch Spinoza, right? And he said this: freedom could only be understood within its limitation. The moment there's no limitation to freedom, what we have is chaos. And what we have to understand, that the challenges for this country is first and foremost, we have to learn to live as a community. We have to look out for each other. You have to be brothers keeper. This is not just a national issue, you know. This is the global pandemic. Every single nation has taken measures to protect their people. I have heard a lot of absolute rubbish being talked. Oh, masks would kill you and so on and so on, and all kind of foolishness. For God's sake, man, be reasonable. Since I have been a child to this day, everything I've seen on TV, I've gone to hospitals and so on, doctors have been wearing masks all my life. But you come and tell me foolishness that masks is going to kill people. I mean, what sort of nonsense is this? Are we reasonable people? For God's sake. I think that is the basic challenge, that there is an absence of reason among members of the public here. Not all, among members of the public here. Now listen to me. There's one thing I've always tried not to be, is to be naked of reason, is to be naked of thinking. I never ever want to be accused of a poverty, not so much of knowledge, you know, but a poverty of the ability to think. You understand? So what we have to understand is that this is a country of vast limitations. But in those vast limitations, it gives each and every single one of us the opportunity to act, to minimize those limitations. This is a moment where this country, I'm not talking about anybody else, I'm talking about St. Vincent The Grenadines. I don't want to frighten anybody, but listen to me carefully. 1, we have the pandemic. 2, we had the suffering. 3, we had the dengue fever, right? 4, the economy is in trouble because of all of that. And 5, we're into the hurricane season. This country could be approaching the eye of a perfect storm. Now, I, Richard BYRON-COX, hold the highest honor in this land, that of citizens. So do you. It is a privilege which requires that you carry out your responsibility. This we must understand. This is a moment where each and every one of us must stand up and say, this is my country. I have the privilege, the honor of holding the highest office. I have a responsibility to live up to that office.
Well, I think that's a perfect note on which to end this week's edition of Roundtable Talk. We haven't even touched on your writings, but Mama's Tears was certainly not in vain.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you for being our guest, and we'd certainly have you back on another occasion. Thank you.
It was my great honor and pleasure.
Okay, that's the program for today. We'll see you again next week, Wednesday. Until then, good evening.